Most people don't lose time because they're lazy. They lose time because their systems leak it. Quietly. A slow publishing process here. Repeated questions there. A website that looks fine but still creates hesitation. A tool stack that's powerful on paper but messy in practice. That's the stuff that eats weeks without anyone noticing. This voice script is a guided walkthrough of the thinking behind my work and why I build the way I do. It's not a pitch, and it's not a CV. It's a clearer spoken version of the same story. How I've developed my approach, what I value, and what I've learned by solving real problems with real constraints. I'm Luke Anthony Houghton. I'm the person behind Project ID, and my work lives in that overlap between design, engineering thinking, and operational problem solving. I build systems across Squarespace, Knack, Replit, Node.js, Make.com, Google's ecosystem, and AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity, not as a pile of platforms, but as a connected way to reduce friction and improve clarity. All right, let's walk through it, page by page. Project ID exists because I care about how digital behaves, not just how it looks. A lot of people call something done once it launches. I'm more interested in what happens after launch, when content grows, when a team changes, when the business gets busy, and the cracks start showing. My career has been shaped by one recurring idea. The best deliverable is stability, not shiny features, not clever hacks. Stability. The kind of structure that lets a team publish without second guessing. The kind of workflow that prevents duplicated effort. The kind of decision path that doesn't rely on one person just knowing. That's the foundation of how I work. Intent first, then structure, then execution, then refinement. It applies to brand identity, content systems, and technical implementation. The goal is simple. Make digital assets easier to operate, easier to evolve, and harder to break. And this document, the one you're hearing in voice form, is an in-depth view of my path, my thinking, and the tools and skills I use to build practical systems. My education didn't just teach me topics, it shaped my operating mindset. I started in applied science, moved into forensics, and then studied biochemistry. That sequence trained a kind of discipline that shows up in everything I build now. Be precise, document the steps, validate what you're working with, and don't get emotionally attached to assumptions. Forensics teaches you how to deal with incomplete information without panicking. You learn to look for patterns, reduce bias, and build confidence through repeatable methods, not vibes. And biochemistry pushes it even further, because you stop thinking in isolated parts and start thinking in interactions. One variable changes, and downstream effects happen. Digital ecosystems behave exactly like that. Change the structure of a page, and it affects discoverability. That impacts acquisition. That shifts support load. That influences retention. So I'm comfortable thinking in systems, not just screens. I'm not interested in theory for theory's sake. I like applied outcomes and using analytical thinking to build a more stable digital reality. Before Project ID, I learned consistency in environments where you don't get to pause the day and rethink the strategy. You deliver, even when it's busy, even when you're tired, even when the situation is unpredictable. Working in places like Martins McColl's taught me operational awareness fast. Retail makes friction obvious. If something's unclear, people hesitate. If something's hard to find, you get the same question repeatedly. If the flow is wrong, everything slows down. That shapes how I think about websites and user journeys later. Hesitation usually means the system is unclear. Then, PSI consultants reinforced something else. Professionalism is structure. Process matters. Communication matters. Documentation matters. especially when multiple stakeholders are involved and expectations can drift. Those roles built transferable skills that I still rely on: composure under time pressure, clarity in communication, responsibility for outcomes, attention to detail, and awareness of human behaviour in decision making. That's the groundwork for how Project ID operates. Real-life systems, not ideal world designs. Project ID launched in 2019 in Orihuela, Costa, Spain. The early years were hands-on, building websites, shaping brand identities, and solving practical problems for businesses that needed clarity more than complexity. Working locally was valuable because you see operational reality up close. People don't want a digital presence. They want something that functions, something they can maintain, something that doesn't create new problems every time they update a page. Over time, I noticed the same issues repeating across different projects. Content publishing was slow, support questions kept returning, platform limitations forced awkward workarounds, and one-off fixes became expensive to repeat. That's where my thinking shifted, away from one-time projects and toward repeatable systems. Instead of solving the same problem from scratch each time, I started building frameworks that could be reused, refined, and scaled. That became the foundation for product thinking inside Project ID. Project ID has never been built in isolation. My work has always been shaped by real constraints, and being based in Spain adds a layer of practical administrative reality that matters. When you're around relocation, residency, documentation, and multilingual needs, including contexts like golden visas, you see how quickly people lose confidence when information is unclear. Clarity isn't a nice to have. It's the difference between momentum and hesitation. And loosely connected experiences around things like cozy homes and PIOC reinforced the same operational truth. People compare quickly, drop off quickly, and only feel confident when information is structured and easy to navigate. Across industries, the thread stays consistent. Structured information beats scattered messaging. Workflow beats one-off effort. Systems scale better than improvisation. And maintainability matters more than novelty. That's why my approach stays systems first and product-led. Make the digital side of a business easier to operate and easier to trust. Capability isn't usually the reason projects fail. Most of the time, failure comes from unclear expectations, vague communication, and decisions made without structure. So my soft skills are built to prevent drift. I keep language direct and practical. I prefer written structure because it reduces ambiguity. Clear notes, clear steps, clear outcomes. Early alignment matters. What are we building? Why does it matter? What defines success? And what constraints exist? When timelines tighten, I don't rely on hero efforts. I rely on process. I break work into dependencies, prioritize what stabilizes the system, and keep delivery predictable. I care deeply about repeatability. I'm not interested in something that works once. I'm interested in solutions that hold up when content grows, traffic increases, staff changes, and the business evolves. My collaboration style is calm, structured, outcome-focused, honest about trade-offs, and always biased toward maintainable solutions. My hard skills sit across design, development, and systems implementation, because the goal isn't just building a thing, it's building the workflow behind the thing. I work deeply with Squarespace and Knack, building structured experiences that balance user clarity with operational practicality. That includes front-end enhancements, structured content presentation, and systemized improvements that reduce repeated manual work. For automation and integration, I use make.com to connect tools, move data reliably, and remove repetitive steps, always aiming for workflows that stay understandable, not brittle chains. For infrastructure and deployment, I use Replit for Node.js environments, controlled script delivery, and lightweight services that support web platforms. I also use Google Workspace for documentation and operational organization, and Google Storage for reliable file hosting and predictable delivery patterns. And AI? I treat AI as an assisting layer, not magic. I structure prompts, define output rules, and keep the final output controlled, on brand, and useful. I work in phases because structure protects quality. First, define reality. What's actually happening? Where is friction showing up? Where is output inconsistent? What do users repeatedly ask? I map constraints, platform limits, content structure, team capacity, and maintenance needs. Second, design the system, not just the interface, the workflow, information architecture, content structure, operational steps, and how changes will be managed over time. Minimalism is deliberate. Fewer dependencies, fewer failure points. Third, build and integrate. Squarespace for web experience, Knack for data-driven tools, Make.com for automation, Replit for hosted logic, and Google Storage for stable file delivery. Fourth, validate and refine. I test across devices, content volumes, and real user paths until behavior is stable and predictable. And I document. Documentation isn't admin, it's leverage. It makes the system maintainable without relying on me for every change. I don't collect tools for status. I use tools that support predictable systems and consistent output. Squarespace is strong for brand presence, content publishing, and commerce. And I'm comfortable extending it when native capabilities don't cover a need. Knack is the operational layer for records, workflows, and structured internal tools, where processes live and people can take action. Replit supports Node.js logic and controlled script delivery without heavy infrastructure overhead. Google Workspace supports documentation and collaboration, while Google Storage supports reliable hosting and stable delivery patterns. Make.com connects workflows and removes repetitive tasks, with an emphasis on maintainability. And AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity are used for drafting, summarization, analysis, and research exploration, always with formatting rules and controlled output. One-off solutions can look impressive, but they often leave behind hidden costs. Maintenance burden, inconsistent outputs, and dependency on specialist knowledge. Businesses don't usually struggle because they lack ideas. They struggle because execution isn't consistent. That's why I focus on workflow, structure, and repeatability. The goal is to reduce the amount of figuring it out again required every week. Friction hides in repeated support questions, publishing delays, platform workarounds, manual steps that multiply with growth, and content that exists but can't be found or reused. Systems reduce cost and increase reliability. They create operational confidence for teams, clients, and end users, and they make scale possible without scaling chaos. That's what shaped Project ID into an ecosystem approach, connected mechanisms that compound value over time. Reliability is tied to trust. Users trust brands that feel consistent. Teams trust systems that don't require constant firefighting. And long-term growth depends on operations that can scale without fragile dependencies. I think in failure modes. What breaks when traffic increases, when content grows, when staff changes, or when someone forgets how the system works? So I design solutions that remain understandable and maintainable. I use structure to protect outcomes, naming conventions, consistent formatting, repeatable configuration, deliberate constraints, not to over-engineer, but to prevent drift. Even small delays, unclear navigation, or inconsistent content cause drop-off. So I treat user confidence as an outcome that can be improved. Better decision flow, better information retrieval, less friction between I need this and I found it. Documentation is part of reliability too, reducing single points of failure so the digital asset stays durable. If you trace my path, education, early work, consulting discipline, and the long build of Project YD, the direction stays consistent. Reduce friction, increase clarity, build systems that scale responsibly. Project ID is the natural outcome of that development, a systemized way of building and improving digital assets so they become easier to run over time. For me, value isn't just what gets shipped. Value is what becomes easier after it ships. Faster publishing, fewer repeated questions, cleaner UX behavior, more consistent output, and less reliance on manual effort. And when I use technology, Squarespace, Knack, Replit, Node.js, Google's ecosystem, Make.com, and AI tools, it's not a random stack. It's a connected workflow designed for operational clarity and maintainability. Going forward, the focus is depth and cohesion. Fewer scattered efforts, more high-impact systems, refined continuously, built to last. Page end. If there's one idea I'd leave you with, it's this. Digital success isn't a moment. It's a system. And systems don't need hype. They need clarity, structure, and repeatable execution. The work is exactly what you've heard. Building digital reality with intent, so teams can operate with confidence and scale without chaos. Thanks for listening through this. When you're ready, the next step is always the same. Define reality, reduce friction, and build something stable.